Welcome back to another episode of the Owl Talk podcast. This is Joe Palazzolo, and in this episode, we are going to talk to some undergraduate athletes, and in particular, we are going to focus on college wrestling. Sigma Pi Fraternity has a great legacy of our brothers competing in collegiate sports, from football to basketball to track and field, tennis, and so much more. We could probably have a whole podcast series just on our student athletes alone. But in this episode, we're going to focus on college wrestling. And I'm joined by three guests to talk about what it's like to be an undergraduate brother of Sigma Pi and a college wrestler. Today, I'm glad to be joined by Franny Gonzalez from Beta Psi chapter at East Stroudsburg University, as well as Luke Petaccia and John Dooley, both from Delta Beta chapter at Monmouth University. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
What's going on?
Hey, Tug. Thanks for having us on.
No problem. All right. Let's have each of you tell us a little bit more about yourselves. Where are you from? What are you studying? Why did you join Sigma Pi? Let's hold off on the wrestling talk just for now. And Luke, since you have an interesting story having joined our former Theta Delta chapter at the College of New Jersey and then transferring to Delta Beta at Monmouth, why don't you start?
How you doing? My name's Luke Petaccia. I'm a senior business administration major, and I'm from Bergen County, New Jersey. So I joined Sigma Pi because I kind of just felt like home. I could walk in the house at any time, could just always chill with the guys. We'd always have a bonfire going or playing basketball outside, or could even just walk in and do homework there just to be around the guys.
I would say I joined Sigma Pi because I really felt the masculine presence with the guys. I saw a group of tougher guys at, I would say, a white-collar school. It was easier to fit in with those guys, not having coming from money. And I just really enjoyed being around everybody. Me and all the guys always got along very well, and I feel like we shared a lot in common.
What are you studying?
I'm a business major, but I minor in photography, and I would say that's my main focus.
Thanks for having me on, Joe. I'm from Long Island. I'm from New York. I grew up in a small community. It was a big wrestling town out there, so it's real nice. I really like where I'm from. Funny enough, I live right next to some of my current brothers now, and we all went to rival schools. So I lived next to our former president, Jack. I lived down the street. Like our high schools were down the street from Elijah Rivera. It's kind of funny how we all grew up with each other, but never really knew each other until down the line. It was like a big foreshadowing in our lives. What I'm studying now, I'm at East Stroudsburg University. I'm studying phys ed and health, and I'm in my junior year, so it's too late to change majors now. I'm in too deep. Why I joined Sigma Pi? So I actually transferred here in the spring, my freshman year. I did a program of community college. I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go first, but I knew that I wanted to study physical education and health. So I did a semester of community college, figuring myself out until that point in between semesters where I started to think, all right, let's see where we want to go. Some friends going to a big school down in New York, and it really didn't seem like the right fit for me. So then I started thinking, okay, like what other places have this major, and do I know anybody that goes there? That was like my big thing. I wanted to not like be an outsider, kind of like know at least some people going in. And then I remembered, like some of my friends, they go to East Stroudsburg. I was cooler with Elijah. Like we hung out a few times. We wrestled together. I reach out to the guys. I'm like, hey, like, how is it out there? And they're like, oh, it's awesome. Like, come down, like, check it out. I impulsively didn't apply to any other schools. I just full sent it on East Stroudsburg. I fully committed to it. I was like, all right, well, if this blows up in my face, it blows up in my face. I'm real excited that I got here. I really think it was the best fit possible for me. I came in, fell in love with the campus.
Let's talk about wrestling then. How long have you guys been wrestling? Also, tell us about some of your biggest accomplishments as a wrestler.
I wrestled in Bergen County. I wrestled at Pascack Valley High School. In high school, I was a state qualifier. I was a 3-time district champion, a region champion. I had like 100 wins with an asterisk. My senior year was the COVID year. So I ended up finishing with 98 wins. We probably had 10 matches that year. If I had the full amount of matches, I probably finished with like 120. So I have 100 wins with an asterisk, 98.
How does wrestling take place during COVID? I'm just curious. Like, how did that happen?
You wrestled with mask. I remember
Really
that. Yep, I have pictures of it. I remember the district tournament when I was a junior. I wrestled with a mask on.
I think
amazing.
I did wrestle with the mask for a little bit, but really it was just like after practice, like you wrestle with the same partner every day. You just try to limit your exposure to people as much as you could.
Yeah, I remember they would have us wear masks at practice, but we would never wear them. So in case like any administrative walked up, like if anybody walks in here, but as soon as I walked out, it was right down again. I don't know how the hell you're supposed to keep on. It was a little string mask. I'm like, I don't know how that's supposed to work.
Incredible. So those are some pretty impressive accomplishments, Luke. Thank you, John.
So I've been wrestling since day one. I can't even. I barely remember my start, but I think I started off around 6 years old. I wrestled all over the place. I started in Philadelphia at a junior program at Father Judge High School in Northeast Philadelphia. So I wrestled there up until eighth grade, and then in high school, I started at St. Joseph's Prep in North Philly, more Center City, but I wrestled there from my freshman to junior season. And that's when I say I really started to get good at wrestling. A lot of city schools have easier schedules. Our coaches would send us up to the Lehigh Valley to wrestle teams like Bethlehem and Nazareth and Easton and all those tournaments. So my record was never really great. I was still over 500, but it was never anything extraordinary because of the competition we went up against. And then, of course, the COVID season, I won my first district title my junior year during the COVID season, which was only a 4-man bracket because a lot of teams, a lot of public school teams in particular, just called off the season because of city health protocols. But since we were private, we were able to wrestle. So it was really just the Philadelphia Catholic League. We had our league tournament and then our district tournament. So it was pretty much the Philadelphia Catholic League tournament all over again. But I did wrestle a kid, a really good opponent in the finals. And then my senior year, I transferred to South Jersey, a small school called Haddon Township. Not a really good wrestling program. They've had a few studs here and there. When I joined, they were like a 2-10 team, so they weren't very good. But I like to think that I brought a lot of energy to that program the year I transferred over. I think I was our first state qualifier in a while. And I would say not my greatest accomplishment, but my funnest accomplishment was being the first state qualifier for them in a long time. Such a small town because it made so much noise. And it felt cool to have the spotlight. That was the first time I ever had a spotlight on me in my life. And so when I took up wrestling at Monmouth, I wanted to keep the spotlight on me somehow.
You enjoyed that spotlight when you were in high school.
Yeah, and I enjoy it now.
I started wrestling the end of my 5th grade year, so I don't even know how old I was at the time. But I got into it from my head high school coach. He was a phys ed teacher, and he had me in 5th grade. So I remember he was giving out these flyers for like the youth wrestling program in our hometown, and he gave me one, and I was like a little short chubby kid at the time. So I was like, oh, like this is not for me. I'm gonna get killed. He was like, yeah, like there's like it's fun, like you play games, and you know how you hook on little kids to like get all these things. There's a pizza party at the end, so I was in. You had me at the pizza party. I'll do whatever it is. I remember my very first practice, 5th grade. Didn't know a single move. I walked in there and I got my ass kicked. I got absolutely destroyed. But something about it, it brought out my competitive nature, and I never knew I had it up until that point. And I realized, wow, like it was kind of fun. And it was like, I wonder what it'd feel like to be on the other side, kicking somebody's ass. So I started doing it a lot more. I started doing these youth practices up until middle school. I got a little more personal here. I only grew up with one parent. I grew up with a single mother. And when I was in middle school, I got into like a more tougher side of life. Like I started like, mature a lot more and realized like some of the things that I had to do around the house. And that's when I opened up to my middle school phys ed teacher, who ended up becoming my head coach in high school. I ended up opening up to him. Something about it, we just clicked. We clicked from there. We became real close. He coached me all throughout middle school. It was like I'd never got that kind of love from like a male side. So it felt like, wow, like this is probably what it feels like. From growing up, seeing each other all the time, I stayed at his house and we built this bond where we were just pretty much inseparable. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
All right. Hey, Franny, I want to talk to you for a moment about managing being a student athlete and also being a leading member of Sigma Pi Fraternity. You're currently the fourth counselor for Beta Psi chapter. What's it like managing an executive council leadership position and being a student athlete?
It's hard. It wasn't easy. It was one of like the big questions that were asked to me during our big election phase. And it was, all right, Fran, like, do you think you can manage being a counselor, being this deep into your major, and being on a sports team here at ESU? I will always be up for a challenge. I will always challenge myself. At first, it was real overwhelming. I'm already, real deep into my major. Junior year, it's supposed to be one of my harder years. And now I have practice every day. Some of my days are from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. And that's not even including chapter stuff. So now adding that on top, it really became overwhelming at first. But then I kind of took a step back. I realized I was doing too much. And then I stepped back and I break each down into three. I'm like, all right, let's break this down. School, wrestling, Beta Psi chapter. From there, I start realizing, okay, like if I do this, I'll have some free time. I can do this for the chapter, and then I can go to practice, come home, do this. Started to click. I started to like get my groove going, and then I started like realizing what more of my position is about. I started focusing on what my position really is and not trying to overstep and working well with my e-board. Thankfully, my e-board is a bunch of the guys that I pledged with. So, we already have this very strong connection. We all trust each other. These are guys that I plan on talking to for the rest of my life. I started to like really get it together. And now we got into our big phase here at ESU, our accreditation phase. That's when I started to do the big workload for my side of things. And I started banging it out, found my balance, felt real good. What I can implement from wrestling into my position is being a leader. I was always put in a leadership position. I was always, and this is not like, tooting my own horn or anything. I was just always put in that position to help lead and to help people achieve what they want to achieve. Being put in that position, I really relate a lot of wrestling back into how I talk to my guys. And it's kind of like the same way I do it with how I do it in like my mock classrooms. I really try to do it in a coaching manner. Like when I talk to my guys here at the chapter, I'm not just bossing them around. I'm motivating them. I'm motivating myself with them, and we're working together to get things done. Once I found my stride, it just got a lot easier now. Now I'm just rolling right through it, just blasting through every wall that's put in front of me, and it feels real good.
Well, let's talk about now, Dooley. Last summer, you won Sigma Pi Fraternity's Guy Red Mackey Sportsmanship Award for your work with Monmouth University's wrestling team. Now, some folks may not realize this, but the Monmouth University wrestling team is actually a club sport at the university. That means that it's not an officially sanctioned NCAA team, but rather the team competes under the NCWA. And as a club sport, you're not just one of the captains along with Luke, but you're also the president of the club. Maybe you can give our listeners, including other student athletes at other campuses, maybe you can give them some insight on what it means to be the president of the club.
Yeah, so I would say coming out of high school, I was just a state qualifier. During the Reason tournament, I lost in the semifinals to a match I should have won. So I kind of just threw the match, got a bad seed at the state tournament, and then ended up not placing, which was a bad look because that was the first year I really did something with wrestling. It's really hard to qualify for the state tournament in Pennsylvania because we wrestled in the Lehigh Valley region, and a lot of Division I superstars come out of there. So coming over there, I wouldn't say I was expected to place at the state tournament in high school, but I definitely should have, looking back on it. And I regret not taking that tournament as seriously. And so that led to me not really having the ideal recruiting. I had a few NAIA schools. I had a school down south in Georgia called Life University give me a near full ride to go wrestle. I don't think I was ready to leave New Jersey. I mean, I was only in Jersey for 1 year before that, and I started to like it. So my mom told me that we were going to visit the school called Monmouth University, and I was like, I don't want to visit that school. I've never heard of it in my life. And then we drove up, we looked at the campus, and then honestly, I wasn't really in my top five, but eventually I think not that I got scared to leave, but I hate flying. And I was like, I think I'm just going to pull the trigger on this Jersey school at Monmouth. I come to Monmouth. I think I'm done with wrestling, but in my first semester there, it was just class coming back. I'm not really an open book unless you get to know me, so I wasn't very social at first, and I kind of hated it. I was like, I kind of need wrestling back. So I'm like, it's either I transfer or then I found this club team. So it was called the Monmouth University Wrestling Club. I showed up to the first practice. There was about like 5 guys in there. It was horrible. I walk in, I'm like, so when's our matches? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what are we practicing for if we don't have matches? They're like, I don't know. And so I met Coach Rich Famularo, Coach V-Rock, and I was like, hey, let's get some matches. Let's make something happen. So we got a squad together of like 4 guys, and then we eventually started getting matches with junior colleges. So we got the matches with the junior colleges. I broke my hand on my freshman season, so I didn't really get to do anything extraordinary that year. Having me in a singlet there and then having people look at my social media on South Jersey kind of put Monmouth on the map a little bit, especially for the younger guys that watched me wrestle in high school. And they're like, oh, so I guess Monmouth has a wrestling team. And I was like, not quite yet. But then moving on to my sophomore season, we had Luke transferring over from TCNJ. He wrestled at a Division III school. So I took that as an opportunity. I'm like, wow, like I have another serious wrestler here that can help build this with me. Push comes to shove over time. We have practices. We wrestle at a club called Triumph Wrestling in Ocean Township. Great club. A lot of really good wrestlers come out of there. But the only problem with that was our practice times were so late that it was hard to get kids out to come to the team. Me and Luke did enough to where we made enough noise to make up for that lack of members on the team and made a social media presence. And so coming into this year, we finally had this big image online that Monmouth has a wrestling team. And so I took it to another level. I got things together. I got us a wrestling room on campus. I got a staff together, a very, very great staff that I'm thankful for. So I have a great staff together. We're finally getting things moving, and now we're a real team beating other real teams for the first time. So this year is an astronomical difference to the past 2 years. So when I came to my freshman year, it was either transfer and go wrestle at an NCAA school or deal with what I have here and make something out of it, and I did.
Before I move on and ask Luke a couple of questions here, when you're saying, we set up matches with other schools and you got a room on campus, just so folks understand the context of what that means, Dooley, maybe you could explain to them that you're doing all of this. You're the one setting up the dual meets as a student. There's no administration. There's no paid staff on the background. It's you.
Yeah, so back to that. So when I said I wrestled at Monmouth, you always have haters. You'll never see a hater doing better than you, but you would have a hater come up and be like, oh, well, you just wrestle club. And that really, really pissed me off because I know the caliber of wrestler that I am. And for somebody to tell me that I'm a club wrestler really got under my skin. So I was like, all right, well, it's not a club team anymore. It's a real team. At the time, I had all control over the club. So I took club out of everything except for administrative paperwork to make this legit wrestling team, which it is now. We had a lot of adversity along the way. It seems the club sports at Monmouth aren't really that strong on campus, I would say. Maybe some are. I think soccer might be, but that doesn't really matter. Speaking with athletics and all this, blah, 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 I'm like, I want to do all these things. I want a room on campus. We didn't have the members for it. So it was kind of like there's not really much I could do. So I'm like, all right, I need to put this in my own hands. They're not going to give me a room. They're not going to give me help. I'm going to do this on my own. Eventually, we got a room in a dorm basement. It was just a storage room. I walked down there. It's all storage and all other things. I'm like, all right, well, this is a space I have to deal with. I'm like, how are we going to get mats? So I go online, the government deals. Coach Ritz told me that Howe High School, or it was Freehold Middle School, is auctioning their mat. So I go online and I find a mat up for auction for $200. At the time, I'm living with my girlfriend in Point Pleasant and I'm working on pools in Long Branch. So I'm in the area to get these things done. So I pulled the trigger on that. I buy this mat. I don't know how we did it, but somehow we got it on campus at Monmouth University. I got this mat sitting in the gym and it's too big to get down the steps. So I'm like, all right, great. I'm like, I don't know how we're going to do this. So I get a group of coaches together up in Long Branch. A guy, Danny Mullen, who has been helping our team a lot and who was my work partner. I let him know about it. We got a few guys together. Coach V-Rock, Coach Rich came, Luke came. And we cut this mat up and somehow fit it down the steps in this dorm basement, and we made a wrestling room. So, like, nothing here was given to us. Everything that's on this table was fought for. They didn't just buy us mats. Nobody bought us anything. we had to bring everything to the table. We had to bring all the resources to even just wrestle, So it's we came a long way, I would say. So to even be a wrestler here is, I would say, an accomplishment itself, because at other schools, you walk in, there's already a mat room, there's already coaches, there's already all this stuff. For me, it was like, I have to make this, and I don't know how I did it, but here we are.
Yeah, I think that's a critical difference between talking about what you're doing as a student athlete versus what some of our other student athletes out there are doing around the country. I mean, like I said in the introduction, we've got Sigma Pi men competing in all variety of sports all over the country, but they have administration behind them. They've got folks who are helping to do these things. Now, Luke, I want to get your perspective on what it's like being a student athlete competing in the NCAA versus the NCAA, since you have the unique history of being under both groups. Also, I know you do a lot of work for Delta Beta chapter around philanthropy and community service. So, what's the difference between those two national organizing groups, and then how do you manage being a competitive wrestler and doing all the work you do for the chapter?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting topic to talk about. To go back to Dooley and what he put into the club, it was honestly a tremendous amount of work, not even physical labor, but doing like the background, the emails, the paperwork, constantly texting people. I mean, in order to get things moving, you kind of have to like harass people. You kind of have to like be annoying. You kind of have to, and you have to push for what you want. I guess when I got to Monmouth University, I noticed Dooley was kind of, I guess, like pushing this big boulder up a hill, and he just needed a couple extra hands on it. And once we got a support group around that, now the ball is rolling. Now we're just downhill, and the success is coming in waves. We're just making big step after big step. So that's awesome to watch and to see it come into fruition too.
It has to be very satisfying.
Yeah, it is satisfying, and I think our end goal is to make Monmouth wrestling a D1 sport, along with the other sports at Monmouth University. We're on the fast track to get there. It's going to take more work, more money, more effort. I think just time. We got a good cast doing it, so that's good.
And it'll take more success, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, the success that you guys have had in the NCAA. But I'm curious about that difference between the NCAA and the NCAA. What do you think about it, Luke?
All right, see, the NCAA is hard as shit. That's really tough wrestling, and don't let TCNJ's designation as a D3 school throw you off. That's like a cutthroat program they have over there. And I wish like the most success for them. They have hard ass practices, hard competition, and they go to battle every day, and they train to be the best. And that's just D3. I mean, there's levels to this shit. There's like wrestling is a sport where it's you against another guy, and whoever's put in more work is going to win. And a little bit of the difference that we have at Monmouth is there's no system set in place. There's no one there making you get better. Your success is on you. So whatever you put into it, you're going to get out of it. And the NCAA Nationals, the league that we're in now, it's really tough. Those guys are solid wrestlers. Dooley and I both qualified for that, and neither of us placed, but we're going to be all Americans this year. We're gonna go and tear it up this year. But yeah, at any level of wrestling, the guy across from you is trying to beat you. It's kind of the same in
Yeah,
that.
I also want to butt in that just because we're NCAA doesn't mean that we're not facing NCAA opponents here. We go to these open tournaments. We have an open tournament this Sunday at Centenary University. That's a Division III program. Last year, there was teams like LIU and Binghamton. They're all Division I programs. So for Luke to talk about these killer programs, like this is what we're up against. We're up against the best of the best. I mean, the cool thing about this is you can take wrestling to as far as you want to go. Wrestling's not a team sport necessarily. It's an individual sport. So if you qualify for certain tournaments, you're up against the best of the best. And to do that with what me and Luke were against last year, me and Luke were almost training each other. Luke also didn't mention that we both wrestled Division I transfer teams at the NCAA Nationals. So it's not like we're going up against just other NCAA guys. It's you're going up against whoever's there, NCAA or not.
Yeah, I think that's a clear distinction too that folks should understand.
We're competing against these guys and we're winning. We're turning a lot of heads. I think the team's just building more and more every year, and as we go on, there's going to be a lot of recognition around Monmouth wrestling. To get to what you said about philanthropy and community service, as well as being a student athlete, they always say student comes first. You do have to keep up on your grades, but you want to train and you want to be good at wrestling at the same time. So what I found is having time management is the most important. Creating a calendar, and not just creating a calendar, but sticking to abiding by those times, and then also taking out whatever events you have in there is important, keeping up to date on it. On the side, doing large events like the Liftathon and another event I'm planning coming up. These are huge events that take a lot of time and effort. You have to have like a lot of motion to get this stuff going. You have to be persistent the same way Dooley was to start the club. So a lot of the important skills are being able to deal with people, being able to like create a culture around an event, and also being professional, being able to reach out to people and getting to your point, saying what you need from them and how they can contribute, and then how it'll help them in the long run as well. Sigma Pi isn't just a fraternity. There's a lot of moving aspects. There's athletes, there's community service, there's philanthropy. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and I think it's a huge part that people don't realize when they think about a fraternity. So yeah, I think time management is just the number one key to being able to do those things.
Yeah, past Grand Sage Steve Lawler would always say that Sigma Pi fraternity is more than just a fraternity. It's everything from a local support system to a home away from home for the guys who join. And to your point, Luke, it's also filled with philanthropists and community service guys. And from your own chapter, there's military guys, there's student athletes. We've got everything in Sigma Pi fraternity. This is a good conversation. I'm curious about you guys, about your future. Being an undergraduate, being a student athlete, those things only last so long. What are your plans after you graduate? John, maybe we'll start with you.
I like to say that I would somewhat stay close to the path that I made. As I said, I was a photography minor. I'm really into photography. I have my own company. It's called Mr. South Jersey Photography at mrsouthjerseyphotography.com. I think what I would like to do when I graduate and what I'm doing now is getting more involved in the sports photography and videography. And I think that's what I'm going to want to stick with. Of course, I have my business background, so I'll always have something to fall back onto, but I don't even like to think that way. For me, it's plan A or nothing. So I think I'm going to stick through my photography business and take it as far as I can, just like I did with taking Monmouth Wrestling as far as I can.
Luke?
Yeah, so I do business administration with a concentration in small business management and entrepreneurship. So one day I want to have my own small business. Right now I'm learning kind of the management side of that, how to do paperwork and manage people, just owning a business in general and what comes with that. I want to have my own HVAC business one day, air conditioning and heating. So that's going to start with me going out, just working for a company and learning how to do the actual hard skill, following up with a certificate to be able to have my own business and work on people's houses or commercially.
Yeah, I also forgot to mention that after wrestling's all said and done, I think I'm going to try and get involved in MMA, maybe get a few amateur fights in because I'm a competitor and I like to compete. I think that also opens up gateways for me to take pictures at events like MMA and maybe eventually events like the UFC.
I really do have a big plan of what I want to do when I leave ESU. I'd like to think of myself as somebody who likes to plan a lot of things out really, really ahead. This plan has been in motion since I was in high school. Aside from the fraternity stuff, that came out of nowhere. That was never in there, but we made it work. My big plan now is finishing up my degree on time, going home, hopefully working back in my home district with the man that I now see as my father, my old head coach. Hopefully work side by side, and we'll be working in the exact same school. And that's been our big plan since my freshman year here now. So we've been planning this out, shaping to be reality now. That's my first major step, From there, I do want to get my master's back at home. I'm leaning more towards Hofstra University, just because that way I'm home and I can teach and I can bang all these things out. And now from there, I really plan on going the administration route. Like that's my overall big goal, what I see myself doing 20, 25 years from now, being on the administration side of things. My dream job is to be an athletic director. That's what I have strived to be. That's what I constantly push myself towards. And I know that with all the hard work, it's all going to come out and be clear. I've already gotten a glimpse of believing in something until it's a reality. So now that's the way my mindset is now. Along with the chapter, I plan on being really active with our chapter as an alumni. I think what we have established here with our current alumni is something that I personally want to keep going down the line. Coming back, checking out the house every now and then, or donating money to the guys, seeing what I can do to help out the chapter. Because honestly, coming back to it, I owe wrestling everything. Wrestling has brought me all the relationships I have here. If it wasn't for wrestling, I wouldn't be in Sigma Pi. It all comes back down to that. It all correlates down to this one sport. So I want to do that. I want to give back. I want to give back to the ESU program. You know, they took me in when they didn't need to. I walked on and they gave me a shot and it worked out for both of us. I want to come back and be able to motivate those guys in the future. I want to, see what my GGGG littles are up to or all that. So I'm real excited. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm a little scared about graduating. I'll be honest, I kind of blinked and all of a sudden I'm, halfway through my junior year now, so it's starting to, hit me. It's starting to like, all right, now I'm the old head in this house.
Good answer. Good answer. By the way, that's what happens. You just all of a sudden you turn around and you're.
I literally blinked and I'm like, whoa, like stop.
Look, this conversation has been great, guys. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts with all of our listeners. Before we go, do you have any parting comments for our listeners? Luke, we can start with you.
No parting comments. Thanks for having us on.
I don't really have much. Make sure to follow the wrestling team on Instagram at Monmouth Wrestling to keep up to date with how we're doing. And hopefully me and Luke become the first All-Americans, maybe even national champions in Monmouth University history.
I'll keep it real simple. It's to just believe. If you want something and you really, really feel like you can get it, as long as you believe, that's all you need. Belief is one of the biggest things. It starts down with you. Belief is the seed that really grows this giant tree that is our lives. If that's one thing I could leave people with is to never stop believing.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Franny, Luke, and John, for being guests on Owl Talk and for giving us an inside look at the lives of undergraduate athletes and specifically into the lives of college wrestlers. And hey, if any of our brothers listening right now are undergraduate student athletes, reach out, hit us up. We want to talk to you about your experiences and maybe have you on a future episode of the podcast. For the latest on what's going on in the world of Sigma Pi fraternity, follow us across social media. We are at Sigma Pi, all one word, on Instagram, X, and Facebook. On YouTube, we are at Sigma Pi fraternity, also all one word. Thank you to everyone who listened to this episode, and we look forward to you joining us for the next Owl Talk podcast.